Okay, so we got all our bushings and our parts and our pieces pressed in from NPD. We got the conversion kit here to change the original drum brakes in the front over to disc to give us a little more stopping power, because some guys like me think we have to stop for some reason. We got to get these new coil springs pressed together. We've got a tool to do that with, compress the springs. We're going to try to get this thing looking a little more like a car today. So you guys go check out npdlink.com and we'll see if we can't get something put together here.
First thing we do is put the upper control arms in place. Make sure to put the lock washers on with the bolts. The alignment shims will be done later on the alignment rack. Make sure the bolts are all tightened before you go any further. Using a little grease on the lower control arms will make them slide into place a lot easier on the frame. You can align the lower control arm better with a punch or a Phillips screwdriver than you can with the bolt. Once again, don't forget to tighten the bolt securely. You will need to compress the spring before trying to put it in place. To do this, you will need a spring compressor. We went up to O'Reilly's Auto Parts to get ours. Once you have the spring compressed, you put it in place by placing the top of it into the frame and bringing the bottom control arm to hold it in place. Then you put the spindle in place by placing it on the bottom ball joint and bringing the top control arm to the top of the spindle to hold it in place. It's easier to put the nut on the bottom ball joint before trying to bring the top arm into place. Don't forget to tighten the top and the bottom ball joint castle nuts and then place the cotter pin in them to hold them in place. Once all the bolts are tight, make sure to take out the spring compressing tool by unscrewing it and feeding it down through the shock hole in the bottom control arm. Using a little Loctite, put the backing plate and the brake caliper holder in place. Using the longer bolts, put the tie rod and holder in place. Don't forget to bend the bolt locks in place. Take the new bearings out of the box and pack them with grease. You can find a grease bearing packer at your local auto parts store. We got ours from the great guys over at O'Reilly Auto Parts. Put the bearings in place, making sure not to get any grease on the rotor itself. Tap the seal into place using a socket around the same size as the seal. This will keep the seal from being damaged when you're putting it in place. Slide the rotor onto the spindle, spinning it so it falls into place nicely. Then slide the front bearing and retaining ring into place. Then put the front castle bolt on, tightening it to the specs given in the kit with a torque wrench. Once the bolt is tightened down to spec, go backwards just enough to place a cotter pin through the spindle. Remember to bend the end of the cotter pin up so the cotter pin stays in place. Then, using a rubber or plastic hammer, tap on the grease cap. Place the brake shoe clip on the back of the pad that faces the caliper piston. Putting a little bit of lithium grease on the caliper pins will keep them sliding freely. Place the brake pads on the piston, putting the brake pad with the clip towards the back piston and the brake pad with the holes towards the front. Now it's time to install the brake caliper. Place the brake caliper on the spindle and place the bolts through it to hold it in place. Tighten your brake caliper down as snug as it'll go. Place one of the two brass crush washers on each side of the brake hose, then place the bolt through and attach it to the caliper.
Okay, so we started out this morning with a table full of parts, and just a few short hours later what we wind up with is a front end that actually looks like it belongs on a car. We got the brake conversion kit done. We're all set to go. We got the coil springs in, no problems, upper lower control arms. The only thing we have left to do now is we need to do our steering links, connect the two front ends together, our drag link across the center, and we're pretty much done with the front suspension. It's time to get started on the rear.